There we go. This meeting is being recorded. It's the first meeting of the fourth cohort of this series. We've been doing this series, I think I started in maybe mid-90s with some folks here at Rocketdyne. And then Bill Bellows says, why don't we do it on the phone? And I said, I never thought of that. So we started doing it on the phone. And then I did that for a lot of years. And then the Deming Institute picked it up, and we did it under the Deming Institute sponsorship, and did that for 5 or 6 years. And then Into started it up again most recently last year, I guess. So we've been doing this quite a while. I still find it fascinating that I read the book that I've read a bunch of times and find something that wasn't there last time I read it. And Kevin talks about that in the foreword, where he had read the book and somebody encouraged him to read it again. And he read it again and he said, oh my gosh. And one of the things I discovered is these discussions are really useful, especially when we have beginners asking questions, because they're seeing things the rest of us, we get trapped into, we think we know what Deming's talking about, and then somebody asks the question and you go, gee, I never thought of that. I wonder how we could explore that. So I think it's great to have the beginners asking questions and being willing to ask those questions and challenge those of us who think we're smart. What did you see in those beginning things, the two forewords and the about the author that struck you?
To me, just kind of rereading it, and like I said, I'd been many years since I read it. Just the timeliness of it, I think, just it kind of gives an overview, and here's what all this stuff's about, and remembering that, and then thinking, okay, well, all that stuff still applies.
Yes. The interesting thing for me is when I looked at this, I saw that he got a degree in mathematical physics, PhD, in 1928. And I went back and said, I want to do a timeline, and looked at what was going on between Einstein coming up with the theory of relativity in 1908 or so, and then up through 2028 when Deming got his degree. And so Dr. Deming got his degree in mathematical physics when the physics view of the world was changing from Newtonian's very tight description of what was going on to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And Deming talks about a transformation. That is what he's talking about when he says transformation. He's not talking about a little tweak. He's talking about throwing out everything and looking at it with brand new eyes. It's rather amazing that he managed to get a degree in mathematical physics, and then as a physicist starts reminding us that the numbers and data we collect aren't the important part of what we do. The important part of what we do is how do we help people learn. He talks frequently about there is no substitute for knowledge.
I think that, just picking up on that about how to help people learn, what saddens me after 45 years, people are still not learning what really needs to be done. And I remember when Dr. Deming passed away in 93. I remember 93. because I had a ski accident in '92, and I remember, I think it was the New York Times that said, "Deming is dead, long live Six Sigma." Now, I've been a big user of Six Sigma. That's not the point. But the point is that helping people to see things differently, which has always been my way of thinking, and has been a tough challenge because, and I think the root cause of all of these failures, certainly in the UK, and having spoken at a conference in Norway 4 years ago and in Spain 2 years ago, it seems to be the same in Europe, that it's the university education and what we're teaching people is doing the wrong thing. And I've got it here somewhere, because from the Deming forum run by Hazel Cannon, who's a close friend, and I was at Bill Sherkenbach's seminar in London 3 weeks ago, and I still use it. And if I can find it quickly, and here it is. It was we had something in the UK called Tetramine, and and I prefer this to it's the tetrad.
Oh yeah.
And I have this on my desk all the time: variation, people, knowledge, and systems. But that's a good conversation breaker, an icebreaker. And but coming back, helping people to see things differently, and then you engage them, and that's a good way to get into it. And maybe start off with variation, because as a chartered statistician, that's my background, and quality director and all the rest of it. But it's really helping people to see things in a different way, do things in a different way, and get them started on that never-ending journey.
Yeah, it's intriguing to me. Deming helped me with my light bulb going. I taught high school math and English for 8 years, and just discovered that what I teach and what the students learn are much different. Yeah. And what I also found out in listening to Deming, who talked about new knowledge coming from outside and by invitation, I figured out that what was happening when I was teaching high school was those people I was teaching hadn't invited me in. They may or may not have been interested in the subject area. And if they're not interested, learning isn't going to take place. So the challenge I found becomes asking questions of people so you stimulate their thinking and they will start asking questions. And once they start asking questions, you have a chance, because that's an invitation. It is difficult, though. I read something that Tolstoy wrote, I don't know, however many 100 years ago, maybe more, about taking on new views of the world. And back then, he was offering the same complaints and even some reason for it, of why we don't manage to change our view of the world. And it's the fear of giving up what you've always known and taking on something new. Russ Akoff used to remind us the two hardest things in the world to do are to break a bad habit, and the next hardest thing to do is to start a new habit. And we're asking people to do both at the same time.
Yeah. And I think, in my experience, that's one of the flaws of management, to paraphrase Russ Akoff. But the managers, the senior managers, the executives have got there, and I think they don't want to show their ignorance, and they don't want to change their norms and paradigms and do things in a different way. because they feel threatened by somebody in a junior position coming up and challenging their thinking, and they suppress them.
Yeah, and it's even deeper than that, I think, because and Deming talks about it. He mentions that one of the things you have to do if your light bulb goes on is to help other people pull away from their previous beliefs without feeling guilty. And when I first read that, I was thinking, why would you feel guilty? And the answer is because I remember talking to somebody who said, I've been doing this for 25 years and I found out it's wrong and I feel terrible about all the things I've done. and I tried to console him by saying, well, my kid's now at the time 20 years old and he's doing things different from what he did when he was 2 years old. And the things he's doing are probably better in a lot of ways. And I don't think he should feel guilty about what he did when he was 2 years old because he only knew what he knew. And so the 25 years you've been doing things, you were doing what you knew. If you've learned something new, you now have a choice. You can continue with the old practice or start something new. That's a big gift.
I've kind of heard too, I wonder what you guys think about it, that behavioral change, I don't know if that was must or often, but needs to be accompanied by like a dramatic or traumatic event, right? Something that is emotional for the person. And even to the point of, I went through many years ago, went through a management kind of seminar or whatever, or exercise. And they put some donuts over in the corner of the room, and they had this group come in and they spit it on the donuts, just a shock value, and that was supposed to help you learn, which was didn't help me at all. But it I kind of see the point of I don't know if any of you have had any experience with that you need to have some kind of a dramatic event to facilitate that change in behavior.
Well, I can see a lot of companies tend not to look for different answers until they're going down the toilet and maybe have no chance of recovery.
That's for sure.
How about?
Sorry, I think one of the big problems is the need for knowledge and the need to understand. The SOPK is a great collection of ideas that help us think about all the aspects of the work that we're involved in. But you're surrounded by people who want instant results. Somebody has to make a decision now, so I've made the decision, so go and do it. And they don't want to sit back and think about measuring what we're doing, for starters, where we really are, those sort of things. In construction, we don't get haven't had the kind of long-term data thing that you get from a manufacturing process of making thousands of widgets or whatever it is. Our activities tend to be 3 months, 3 months of digging, 3 months of laying pipes, 3 months of putting concrete on the ground, all that sort of stuff. So it's all 3 months. So you've only got 3 months. And it's actually only a matter of weeks to get the data together to think about what we're actually achieving. So it's very much a kind of, what's the word? Instant knee-jerk reaction to why we are not making the targets. And the Deming thinking and the new economics helped me greatly in setting up systems and things like that. But still, the biggest difficulty was getting over understanding what was going wrong, if you like. For me, you guys might not appreciate it much, but I got heavily into non-conformity. Because the things that cost us a fortune in construction are the things that we have to go and dig out again, or repair, or mend, or stop for, or something like that. And I thought that would sell. I really thought I could sell that to the top management. And it really did sell sometime after I left. Up until then, there was a resistance.
Yeah, it's difficult to change an organization that's set in its ways. Russ Acuff used to say, it's no easier for a company to recognize its shortcomings than it is for you to recognize your shortcomings. You need help from the outside, or at least an outside view. So what do you think about Deming's definition of quality? What is quality? A product or a service possesses quality if it helps somebody and enjoys a good and sustainable market. That's very different from most definitions. It includes the economics.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
Sorry, in industry, again, quality is defined by the customer and all that, and in our forms of contract, those sort of things are specifically designed. So they like in construction, the clients like being the customer, and they like being the focus of being pleased, but they don't want to pay for it.
I add something?
Yeah.
I think quality means consistency. You get what you can rely on what's going to come next. You know, when you order a second one, whether it be a service or product, that it's going to be similar to the first one.
Yeah, and I like the idea that it also is tied to economics, because if you don't look out to the future, Deming always pushed that the future is part of the system, and if what you do is get really good at making buggy whips or carburetors, and you focus on that and don't focus on what the customers might need in the future, you're going to end up out of business. So, and his idea is that the point of being in business is to create jobs and more jobs. And you can't do that if you aren't looking at the future.
Yeah, I remember working with Motorola at Motorola, and I said we exist because of our customers. If we don't have customers, we don't have a business. And a good friend of mine, John Pigott, wrote a book with John McDonald called Global Quality, and their definition of quality was delighting the customer by exceeding their expectations. And the customers with a small c and a capital C. So you are thinking of the future, you are thinking of economics, you are thinking of going beyond, you are thinking about anticipation of future needs, wherever that might take you. And you won't always get it right because the environment will change and throw a curveball at you. So you've got to be prepared to react and have a system that can be able to react.
Yeah, and there's the Deming says that what organizations ought to be asking, what business are we in? And then what business do we want to be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in corporate America, the lifespan of somebody in a position of responsibility is unlikely to have him looking anywhere near 5 years or 10 years out. He's looking to when he's done with his run at whatever's going on and moving on to his next job or assignment. It's very short term compared to Deming's idea.
Yeah.
I also find it interesting and as time has gone on, even more so, that Deming was really worried about how our organizations treat our people. He talks about we're destroying our people, and he talks about the ways that's happening. And I find that intriguing and disconcerting, because I can see it. I can see how what we're doing is you're not helping. If you want to help somebody do better, you have to give them the chance to develop pride in what they're doing, and if it's a student, joy in learning. So I discovered as a school teacher that my job wasn't to help people learn. My job was to deliver curriculum. There's a bunch of things these people have to know, and you have to get them to know it. So, well, what if that's not interesting to them? Doesn't matter. They have to know it. Can't get out of this school unless you know this stuff.
Yes, the basics.
The basics.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had a question for Alan to back up. Can I?
Yeah.
When you talked about nonconformity, and you said the company I think you worked for embraced it after you were gone. What aspects do you think they embraced it, looking at nonconformity? Like maybe, when we say something doesn't conform, is it because we need to relook at the limitations we place, just revisit that and accept something, a broader scope of what's acceptable, or learn that your original limitations were correct? I mean, anyway, how did they look at it, if you know?
Well, again, the real problem with construction is that we're mostly doing what a client has demanded, and they've written the specification. So, in variation terms, specifications way down the list of things that we should be worrying about. But we have to achieve those things. And when the tests show that we didn't, it's it's not easy to roll the car out and stick it on a ramp and to change the wheels or something. We have to break it out and make a hole in the program and fix it. So nonconformity was something that people get very hung up about. Nonconformity as well. It's sort of like want to know precisely how much it's going to cost to repair. And my system worked on the basis of wild guess. We've got a real problem here. Is this £1,000 problem, or a £10,000 problem, or a £40,000 problem? And that helps focus some management teams. But we still end up at risk from these things that have gone wrong. And the big problem is that people don't know what right is, for me. And that was one of the things that cropped up time and time again. Something goes wrong and people say, oh, I didn't know we were required to achieve that. We didn't know we couldn't do it. And some of those can be very expensive, of course.
Well, Alan, were you...
Go on.
Go on.
No, go on.
Alan, were you involved with Blue Water Shopping Centre?
Oh, no.
Right, okay.
I was Medway Tunnel. Would that be anything for you? Or?
No, I just because I knew somebody who did the doors. Thinking about non-conformity, did the door. Blue Water Shopping Centre, I think, is in Kent in the United Kingdom. Very large shopping centre. Lots of different retailers there. They got the contract to build the wooden doors for the whole shopping centre. They got there on site, and every door had to be reworked because of non-conformance, because the specifications were set and the tolerances were not really well thought through by the architects, the designers. So they had to rework everything. So, but my point was, with non-conformity in your business, Alan, were there not lessons learned through history that you could then push back on the client and say, we need to do, we accept what you're asking for, but our experiences say X, Y, and Z, so we'd like you to reconsider alpha, beta, and delta.
Yeah, you'd think. I mean, there's a batch of
So,
things that we learn that we always have trouble with, and we, as a construction company, can do something about that by training our people and paying attention to does everybody know what we're doing. But then there's this gap suddenly that appears in the range of these problems in what is acceptable to the client, and you end up in a negotiating area, a sort of a black area where there is no right or wrong, even though it's wrong because it didn't meet the spec. There's no right that actually gives you access to money. And a little example, well, a tiny example of this one was um, we have things called provisional sums, which the client doesn't know what they really want, but they've specified something. Sorry, they do know that they want, and an architect has said they wanted a specific toilet cubicle on this job, and there were quite a few of them. They arrived late because they came from Canada all the way across the Atlantic. Seemed to be a problem. And when we actually installed the blooming things, the chippy asked me, he said, "You must come and have a look at this. I can't make the doors fit to these cubicles." I mean, yeah, a cubicle? Bloody hell, how can that go wrong? Sorry, I shouldn't use that sort of language. And um, and we tried every way, which way we could to fix the hinges on the other way, upside down, back to front, inside out, you name it, we tried. We could not make these doors close the gap between the two side frames. They'd hang and they'd turn and open and close and lock and all that sort of stuff. So we rang Canada or emailed them or something in those days. And they said, well, we make all our public toilet cubicles like that because we don't want people shooting up drugs in a nice quiet place. So you've chosen a public related toilet cubicle, and that's why we make them like that. We didn't choose it, so we went back to the client and say, here is a letter from the client, from the people who make these cubicles. They're made for public consumption. It might not work for your unions in your workshop, but we bought what you want. These cubicles doesn't sound much nowadays. These cubicles totaled about 30 grand. And the guy who I was dealing with said, get me some more cubicles quick. And they paid for the new cubicles, but they never paid for the old ones because they weren't what they wanted, and yet they were exactly what they specified. So you've got this difficulty that the money becomes a negotiation. You know, when you sell a car, you don't get the keys unless you part with the cash. But when you buy a bridge, you've got people protecting their areas of design or areas of the forms of the contract and things like that. So you have this negotiation gap, and that's a difficult thing.
I think in this case, they didn't, there was an expectation of privacy by definition what it was. So in this case, on the one hand, at first I was thinking, well, they didn't specify enough. They were missing enough in their specifications. But then you look at it again and it's like, wait a minute, for some things, it's inherent what you would expect. So in this case, I think the supplier was wrong, that they needed to say, hey, by the way, right, that there's a certain gap.
No, I don't buy that. I mean, the supplier sells it on a catalogue.
Oh, you can see the gap in the door because that was the problem, right? The gap
exactly,
in the door.
Sort of you buy it off a catalogue and you can see the gaps and you can see the pictures and the dimensions and things. What's the problem?
Right. There you go. If you can see the gap, then it's on
that's what you
person
specified.
buying.
I mean, it goes against everything that we personally would think about privacy and the like, but
interesting that they made them like that. I mean, it's a
well, I've never been to Canada, but and it may have changed in the last 20 or 30 years. But that if you think of that as that I've given you a load of background to that, and it's not a one-off thing in construction. It's happening every month on every project that something becomes a problem of that sort, and there's no actual there may not be an actual solution. It will be okay when the bridge is built and people are driving over it, but the arguments that go on afterwards for years about the bits and pieces that were associated with it. But there's one a month on every project you can think of.
That event you're talking about reminds me of Deming talking about the quality of a product is the joint responsibility of the customer and the supplier.
That's Deming's.
Yeah, it's a system.
Yes,
and
you help each other.
You learn from each other and
Right.
come to the conclusion as to what you want to do.
And don't take it as a criticism.
Yes.
So a lot of times you have
Right.
the normal human reaction that people react. It's natural in us to react, right? Oh, you're criticizing it. Well, instead of just evaluating what the request is. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get to that level a lot of times, and we have it with OEM customers when there's a problem that arises, right? Okay, hey, this did not meet spec or whatever. Hey, we looked at this, and it's usually somebody new, right? The new inspector came in and said, hey, here's this isn't meeting spec. And the conversation starts, and you get down to, and especially in the medical device world, where you spec out everything possible in every situation. It comes back down to, okay, well, what's really important? What do the customers really like? A lot of times you don't really have the customer's voice in those specifications. We had a situation where, and still kind of have it now, but just a sheathing material, and there's a spec on, pits and imperfections in the outside surface. Not a material, that the patient sees at all, and the surgeon or the care people don't care what it looks like, but it was very tight and a specification that was causing us as the manufacturer to do a lot of extra work and to have our contractors do a lot of extra work. So once there's a lot of inflexibility. It's a very large company we were dealing with, a large medical device company, global company, and but when the supply got low, all of a sudden a lot of that kind of paperwork, red tape stuff kind of fell away. We were able to make some progress because they got their supply was low. They had some other issues going on, and they couldn't afford to go down. And then all of a sudden, now we had a conversation. It was great, because now we had a conversation between us and the customer, and we were able to make some choices and to improve their systems and to improve ours as well.
I'm reminded of about 15, 20 years ago, I was working for a management consultancy, and we did work with Boston Scientific Medical Devices in Ireland. And one of my colleagues, they were making stents, and one of my colleagues were looking at the specifications, and he just dropped in a question: did you ever ask the customer what they actually wanted, i.e. the customer being the surgeon? And they said no. So they'd made up their own specifications, and they had about an 85% reject rate.
Oh,
and then they spoke to the surgeons, and they said, no, we don't need that. We would say set the specification here, and the reject rate went down from about 85% to 2% with no change in manufacturing. But the point of the story is speak to your customer, have a dialogue with them, and as you said a moment ago about Dr. Deming, it's having that joint relationship and joint agreement so that you're both working together in harmony, some thinking about the system in its entirety.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a soccer fan and former player, and I remember listening to somebody, Peter Schultes or somebody else, talking about what you do as a teammate. And what I found in soccer is what your job is not so much to make yourself better and better, it's to help make your teammates better, which is a whole different perspective. And when you're working with a supplier, that's a teammate. So how do you help make the supplier better? And the supplier ought to be working on how he can help make you better. That's the obligation. I also found it interesting that Deming comes from a point of view that better products and services come from better organizations. And he doesn't state it that way, but everything you look at around that is he's looking at the quality of the organization. And I discovered, I was so amazed about when I first started these kinds of conversations like we're having now, where we had people from industry and people from nonprofits. Had somebody from a nonprofit here in the States, and we had for-profit companies. I didn't have anybody in the government on that conversation, but I thought the nonprofit would be operating differently from the for-profit corporations. So I said, "Hey, Herman, tell us about how you do this. How do you handle the fact that you've got different centers receiving stuff, and you want to receive more stuff so you can help more people?" It was goodwill. And I said, "So you don't have to make a profit. How do you run things so that you're not putting arbitrary goals on people and kicking them in the rear if they don't make them, and having them compete, one area against another? You have all this opportunity. Surely you have another way of doing business." He said, "No, we do exactly the same thing. We give every different center a goal to achieve, and then we have competitions about who's doing the best at achieving their goals." We are trapped in a view, and what I discovered is no matter what, whether you're in government, whether you're in industry, for profit, not for profit, wherever you come from, education, we all work for the same organization. They're run in a very similar manner. There are very few organizations run like Deming is offering us the opportunity to do. Certainly, education is not one of them. I remember commenting to somebody that what's happening with schools of business is that we are earnestly helping all of these students learn what worked in the past. We're not doing anything to help them learn what we need to do in the future. Nothing, zero.
Yeah.
We're also not teaching them skills to learn, right? Critical thinking skills and things like that.
Yeah, I did read The Puritan Gift by Hopper and Hopper a while ago, and they were talking about how MBAs have really failed to deliver, that it's short-term thinking, and as Tim just said, teaching things from the past. So I did some desktop research. I looked at some very famous business schools around the world, and they're all teaching problem solving. None of them was teaching problem prevention. And because from my statistical background, whichever methodology you want to think about, it's all about problem solving. But no, think about the system, design the system to prevent the problems in the first place. And that doesn't seem to happen. And of course, with the MBA people, the management by objective and its short-term thinking and the way they're taught, it's like a one semester course. You might do two courses one semester. You pass the exam, you move on, you forget what you've learned. There's no joined up thinking. And it really saddens me that this is still being put forward as the answer when it isn't. And by the way, I should stop talking because my wife tells me that I talk too much. So please don't let me, talk too much.
I don't suffer from that. My wife is a motor mouth and very active. So she can carry on the conversation. I can throw my 2 cents worth in if I want. But
This is being recorded, remember?
Oh, yeah.
sometimes I can't get a word in edgewise, so it doesn't matter.
Mm.
Deming in that first chapter offers a bunch of ways he says people think that things that need to be done to improve organizations, and then offers that they're all insufficient. And they're very typical things. And so you wonder when you're first reading this, if all those things are wrong and that's what your whole organization is based on doing, how do you move on from there? So he lists things like automation, new machinery, gadgets, hard work, best efforts, MBO, more inspection, establish an office of quality, zero defects, meet specs, motivate people. So those are all wrong, and they're wrong because they're not focusing on the main activity. The main activity is learning and working with your customer and understanding how to make improvements. What does an improvement look like? Not every change is an improvement. It's new. It might be new and different, but it may not be an improvement.
And if your system's working well, if you do make a change to the system and you don't see the improvement, you should be able to go back to where you were before, having learned from your mistakes and admit your mistakes, and then go on to a new way, a different way, and this time hopefully improve. They're trying to get that message over. I mean, it's just like brick walls. It really is.
Oh yeah. Well, it's difficult because you have to give up your. We're asking people to change their worldview. It's tough to give up your worldview. If you think the Earth is flat, nobody's going to convince you to sail your ship from Portugal to get to India. That sailing west is a great idea. There's no way you're going to buy into that. So
Yeah.
Helping. I remember one of our Into-In conferences, somebody said, well, I know what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to help us change our thinking. And I said, well, not exactly. I want you to make aware of how you think, and I want you to recognize the limitations, and I want to show you other ways that you might be able to think that would offer you different opportunities, and then you select what you want to do. I don't want to change what you're doing. Your thinking's fine. You might want to expand your view so you can see things that are invisible to you right now. And I think Deming helps with that. Here are things that are invisible to you. You're destroying your people.
Right. And I think we're kind of stuck in, maybe it's a human thing of the X causes Y, and that's as far as it goes. And we have this trouble about seeing systems and consequences of what you just accomplished and how it affected something else. Peter Singh did a lot of good work on that stuff too.
One of my jobs at Rocketdyne was interesting. I got put in charge of what we call cause and corrective action in the aerospace business. When the system doesn't function the way you thought it should and you get a bad result, they want somebody to go study all the causes and come to a conclusion of what they need to go fix. And I found the biggest difficulty I had with these people is to help them understand there's no such thing as a root cause. it's a myth, and you guys are all looking for this silver bullet. And I offered them that you got to start looking at how things are interacting. It's the interactions that matter. It's not the individual things. If you don't study the interactions, when there's a fire, there were three things that could have caused it: oxygen, fuel, and an ignition source. And they all had to act together. Which one's the root? It's a stupid question. And yet they spend a whole bunch of time chasing the root cause and then arguing over whether they got the right root cause.
Right.
I have a friend who executives used to tell me the system is broken because they didn't get a result they liked. And I had a friend who helped me learn that the system you have is perfectly designed to get the result you're getting.
Yeah.
It's not broken. It's doing exactly
It's working really well.
And helping executives understand that their problem isn't that their system is broken. They have a perfectly functioning Toyota Prius, but they think they have a Formula One racer. It's not a broken Formula One racer. It's a perfectly functioning Toyota Prius. If you don't like the result you're getting, you need to change the system.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it is hard. I mean, everybody's kind of doesn't think that way. People immediately go to the cause and effect kind of mentality. And so you've got to, it goes back to learning, right? You got to teach the people you're with and the group, and like you said, suppliers, and help them all learn about these things, because we don't get taught that stuff in school.
No, I'm not sure where I learned about systems, but I managed to grasp some things even before Deming. Deming helped me a lot, though. I remember when I was teaching school, so it's at least 15 years before I had any exposure to Deming. This hospital in Fullerton, California had a baby go home with the wrong parents. I'm reading this article in the newspaper, and they talked about the upshot, and they figured out the baby gone home with the wrong parents within like 3 or 4 days. So they got things straightened out. But then, as the article goes on, they changed their process for how to deal with making sure babies were going home with the right parents. That made sense to me because they went home with the wrong parents. You might want to fix something there. And the other thing they did is they fired 4 nurses. And my brain said, wait a minute. If you have this new process, would those 4 nurses have made this mistake? And if the answer is, yeah, they still could have made the mistake, then that fix is wrong. And if the answer is, no, they wouldn't have made that mistake, why the hell did you fire them? You gave them the process that'll let the baby go home with the wrong parents.
What year was that?
It was like 1973.
70s. Wow. Yeah.
But I was just in my head, I said, this doesn't make any sense.
It's still going on. I think there's in the UK, there was several examples from a couple of our hospitals that people had got to their 20s and discovered that they were the wrong parents because of DNA.
Oh, man.
Oh, my goodness. Oh. Oh.
Wow.
Wow.
The interesting thing is that the folks who were actually involved in that were saying, I really didn't feel as though I was at home. Always didn't feel right.
Wow.
Interesting.
That is intriguing.
Yeah. Wow.
There's also in here, which a lot of people who are beginners to Deming, it does open up their thinking, where Deming talks about the fact that the customer doesn't invent things. There's a whole bunch of people think that all this new stuff that comes about is because the customer came up with it. And what Deming is pointing out is it's entrepreneurs who come up with ideas thinking, this might be a thing that would enjoy a good and sustainable market and help some people. So I'm gonna go try to develop a way to provide this to people, and that either grows or fails, and you can learn from that experience. But the idea that innovation comes from the customer, it's pretty persistent, but it's not very accurate.
Yeah, I really like that. That's common misconception in our field as well, that you got to listen to everything the customer says, and most of the time, it can lead you down a bad path. It definitely can, because also you're not usually the most vocal customers are the ones you're listening to, not necessarily the majority of the customers.
Yeah, the loudest person is the person that gets the attention.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting to me is the technology that's around now increases the volume and speed with which we can get information, data and information. And what Deming talked about in the 90s, even with the more limited resources, devices than we have now, he offered that no amount of data and information is knowledge. So having a bunch of it faster doesn't give you any more knowledge. And Russ, combining that with what Russ Akoff used to say about the idea that we should be concentrating on effectiveness of our actions, and instead we're preoccupied with efficiency. So we end up making things more efficient, but sometimes less effective, and most of the time not more effective.
Yeah, and I think processes need to be efficient, effective, and economic.
Yes.
It's the three together, and then you can get into measuring the waste of the processes and saying, actually, we're not meeting all of these three requirements. We're failing badly, so we need to redesign the system so we achieve all three simultaneously.
Yeah, and the Taguchi loss function is an intriguing addition. The Deming got exposed to Taguchi in 1960 when some of the stuff was published in English. He knew of Dr. Taguchi's work, but he clearly didn't speak Japanese well enough to be able to read it and understand it. But the idea that what you want to focus on is what you want, not how far from what you want is acceptable. Those are two different views of the world. And I love in Out of the Crisis where he says something is terribly wrong when a part just inside a spec limit is deemed conforming and one just outside is deemed non-conforming. He says, that's not how the universe works.
No. And I worked with a manufacturing manager in a bottling hall for a major whiskey distillery here in the UK. And he said, everything's got to be on nominal. And I said, no. I said, that is going to be really expensive to achieve. I said, we need to understand, A, where the specifications came from. Yeah, on target with the minimum variation, absolutely. Thinking about Taguchi's loss function. But we need to know which ones we do need to control and which specifications we can relax to make your life easier. And I think he's still thinking about that. That was like 20 plus years ago. He's now technical director at the same distillery. If you look at my profile on LinkedIn, you'll work out which one it is. I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah, there's something in that story about the Merlin engine during the Second World War. And when the plans passed over to Packard, was it, in the US? They had to do the drawings again because they couldn't understand the range of tolerances that they were being asked to work to. But Rolls-Royce at the time they used to, I don't know, keep all their pistons in a bucket and select the pistons that fitted the holes in the engine.
Yeah. Yeah.
The word for that in the airline or the aerospace industry is that it's selective assembly.
Yeah.
So you got parts all over the place. Let's group them and put the ones that seem to fit together better.
Seem to fit. But, I mean, the intriguing thing about that is if they knew what tolerances were okay, why didn't we all work to them?
There was an interesting thing. I can't remember the year, probably 82 or so. Ford, who owned at the time like 25% of Mazda, was making transmissions, and because Mazda was making so many cars, Ford was making some of the Ford needed more transmissions for their Fiesta, so they sent work to Japan, to Toyota, to say, "Hey, can you make these engines for us?" And they had the same specs and the same drawings that the U.S. had. And after a few years of making parts, Ford discovered that the Mazda transmissions have 1/3 the warranty recalls of the Ford transmissions, built to the same specs and the same drawings.
Yeah.
The difference was that Mazda had figured out, probably because of all their work with Deming over the years and the way they do business, that what we're after is parts that work together well. So instead of shooting for the middle of the specification, they shot for a value, for example, in a gap in a piston and a cylinder in an automatic transmission. They worked to make sure the gap had the minimum amount of variation in it, regardless of the size of the piston and the cylinder. And that kind of thinking, Bill grabbed the idea he got it from the London Underground, where they have places where you're stepping over the gap between the platform and the train, and it says "mind the gap."
Yeah.
And so we talk about minding the gap. It's not about minding the part. It's about minding the gap, understanding the interaction, and working to improve the interaction, not improve the parts individually. Mazda was trying to improve the parts individually, wasn't working on how well they interacted with each other.
Right, but you need a spec on the interaction. You have to define the parameters along the interaction.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about our ICD that we work with. Like you have the Rocketdyne works with its customer NASA. We have the interface control document we call the ICD at the interface. And yeah, and we do have parameters that are define
Yeah,
limits on the, of the combined system.
yes. This influences that. Okay.
Yeah.
We might want to look at that.
But that's also an industry that's has to be, we have astronauts, manned systems, so it's highly monitored, right? And
Yeah. But we do suffer some of the same problems.
yeah, oh, for sure.
We get focused
For
on
sure.
we get focused on the detail and as Russ talked about, if you've got a system and you take a turbo pump off of an engine, and as soon as you remove the turbo pump and start looking at it, you're dealing with something that's a subsystem, and you can't understand its effects on the rest of the system when you're dealing with that part alone. So you need to understand that part's influence on everything else that goes on in the system if you're going to improve its effectivity.
Absolutely. When I was working in California, we were working with light and optics, and getting the most amount of white light into a small fiber optic element. And yeah, there was no way that you were going to specify all those things. Just put them in one place, and and be done with it. The alignment was the most important part of the process, was taking all these things, putting them together, and then doing that alignment. It was different every time. We had our best technician at doing that was loved it, because what she said was it was just it was a different thing every time. You couldn't predict, okay, this one's going to go here, and if I go here, you had to go through that final alignment and optimize it. And it was 25% higher light output because we did that alignment, if we just kind of put everything in place and glued it down.
Yeah, that sparked something when you talked about that. It's different every time. That's another thing about the system of profound knowledge and trying to use it in your organization. We, as humans, we like recipes, and so we want a recipe for our company. So we do these things, and the recipe will give us what we want. And what Deming and the people who have worked in transforming companies talk about is every transformation is unique. Yes, there are certain fundamentals that you use in guiding you, but it's guiding you to learn about the system you're working in, which is different from everybody else's system. And so you can't expect to have a recipe, which is what everybody wants. Just tell me what ingredients to put in and tell me how to cook it, and everything will be fine. There's an interesting cultural difference between Brazil and the US, though, I found, having to do with recipes. My kid likes to cook, and so he's got a Brazilian cookbook, and the Brazilian cookbook tells you all the ingredients, but doesn't tell you the amounts.
Oh, right.
You figure it out, and your souffle is going to be different from somebody else's. And oh, by the way, that's okay.
That's so interesting.
Makes sense. Your taste buds are different than everybody else's too. So
Yeah,
Really interesting.
exactly.
It's only for the talented. That system is designed for the talented, right?
Somebody who knows what they're doing.
Somebody who cares, right? Sometimes you just want to eat, and some people, that's enough. Doesn't have to be super tasty, or they're not as particular. So that system is for, they're more refined. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and it comes back to the failure mode too. People don't want to fail, right? You don't want to, but the good chefs throw food out, right? They spend 2 hours and this isn't any good. Throw it out, start over. A lot of people don't want to do that.
And it goes with the system too. So what's the system? It's the culture, right? So the culture, the people are not as they're a little more relaxed. They value their leisure time. So maybe they're not overworked. Maybe they work a shorter day. I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing here, but that might be the case. And so there's more time to put in cooking and right. It doesn't have to be as procedural. You learn to do it right and take the time. It goes with the culture, Latin culture. Yeah.
That's how my gran used to make buns, cakes. A handful of this and a little bit of that, and it always works. She used to make amazing cakes. It was none of it was written down.
My grandmother did that. She counted how many handfuls of flour to throw in and all that stuff. The rest of us could never get close to the recipe because our hands are different sizes.
I'm sorry, there's something going on in my house. I've got to go and investigate. Excuse me.
Okay, good luck. That's a system you'll want to get some control of.
You're mentioning Ford and Mazda transmissions a while ago. There was a 30-minute video on YouTube, like a documentary from TV way back. And I did have it, but I've lost it. But if somebody can find it, that would be worthwhile sharing again. I think that was the 1970s, Tim? Or 19,
yeah, it was the late 70s or early 80s.
Late 70s. It was on YouTube, but I've lost the link. But it was the transmission study, yeah, because that's useful. And if you talk about recipes there and specifications and this, that, and the other, but it's like when I enjoy cooking, but when I read a recipe, they said, take an egg. What's the operational definition of an egg? Because we get so many different sized eggs over here in the UK, and somebody who worked for Ford, Swedish lady, she's been doing designed experience on the perfect muffin, and she came up with the weight of a beaten egg. So she took the eggs and then she weighed out how much beaten egg you need, and if you like, her quality requirements was the peak on the muffin, so you get the highest peak, and you get consistency. So that's what she measured it as. So, and she uses that as an example to work with her colleagues now. She doesn't work for Ford anymore or Volvo cars. She works for a sanitary products company in Sweden who make toilet paper, sanitary pads, etc. So she gives them a neutral example to engage them in a different way of thinking.
Yeah, that's the idea behind end-to-end thinking network. We want to engage people and get them thinking, get them recognizing their thinking affects their behaviors, and if they're interested in learning how to behave differently, they need to come up with some other ideas about how they see the world, because you're trapped in your own thinking. And Deming's idea that new knowledge comes from outside and by invitation.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
And when Deming talks about outside, he's if you're in an organization, it doesn't mean you can't help improve the organization. The outside part means you have to view the organization from outside, not as a member of the organization. So it doesn't require somebody who's not part of the company to come in and help you understand what to do. It requires somebody who's willing to take a look from the outside. And that's why Deming offered the system of profound knowledge. He says that's a lens that we can use to look at our organizations from the outside.
What does he call it again? Knowledge of profound.
Profound knowledge.
Profound knowledge is his term for that idea.
Yeah, it was interesting. He was working with Claire Crawford Mason on that. If Japan can, why can't we? And he kept telling her there's no substitute for knowledge, and she kept prodding him and saying things like, "What knowledge?" And he came up with the term profound knowledge, and she says, "What's profound knowledge?" So part of working with her forced him to come to some conclusion about what he was talking about. He invented, and out of the crisis, the 14 points, which came from a theory, but he had never codified the theory. And he says in the New Economics, if you apply the system of profound knowledge to transforming your organization, the 14 points are a logical outcome. But he says, if you look at it, he's talking about the system of profound knowledge being applicable to everything you look at, not just transforming your organization. And I think that's calling it profound knowledge makes sense to me, because holy cow, when you look at the world around you, using Deming's view of the world, profound knowledge, and how all those things interact with each other, you can see a whole bunch of things that are invisible to you otherwise.
Yeah.
And I would have loved that he lasted another 10 years or 20 years so we could see what that system of profound knowledge might have transformed into. And I do like it that he calls it a system of profound knowledge, not the system of profound knowledge.
I never noticed that. Yeah, that is good.
Which means a guru would have called it the system of profound knowledge. And the whole point would be following the rules and regulations and the worldview of that individual thing. And what Deming's talking about is opening up your worldview so you can choose how you're going to interact with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as the world changes, it can change. That
Yes,
makes sense as well.
certainly.
Yeah.
And that's I find it intriguing how a whole bunch of companies collect what they call lessons learned, and they have a database where they store all these wonderful lessons he's learned. And I have to laugh, because if you're trying to do something new in an organization and come up with something new that's going to be a change of some sort leading to an improvement, no matter how much you look at the history, that isn't going to help you, because unless the future is going to repeat the past, then what you did in the past is irrelevant, because the future has got different sets of causes and effects that are interacting. So they collect those databases and spend a lot of money collecting them and setting them up so they can be inquired. But I can't imagine that anybody spends much time inquiring those databases.
Yes, but you've got Toyota's, what do they call it? Engineering. They have this data record engineering of all the things they've tried on doors or locks or things that have gone wrong in the past. So that when they start designing another door on a new car, somebody's forced to go through and make sure they've understood what the errors were in the past, so they don't make the same mistakes. So it must work, because that's, I think, was it the Prius, or was it one of the, I think one of the one of the marks of Toyota's more recent stuff was, it was the change, wasn't it, when they went to Toyota started making, what's the other mark? Lexus.
Yeah.
Mm.
All those lessons learned were passed on to the people involved in the Lexus. It was just an amazing. So people can use these things sensibly. It is possible. It's just I don't think we collect. But yeah, sort of like lessons learned is a sort of a superficial way of thinking about it. I think.
Yeah.
Is it?
It satisfies their need to think they're not going to make that mistake again.
Or, yeah, they're doing something. Yeah.
Yeah, in the medical device world, we just actually got FDA approval on a new product, but it's interesting that the FDA for on the 510(k) path, it's all about proving you're the same as competitors or other products that are out there. So and it's very concentrated on proving down to very technical details. How am I the same or close to the same as these other products? And that I think it kind of limits, the manufacturers going out and taking some risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It increases their risk of not getting a return on investment.
The aircraft industry is well known on reusing stuff from one generation of a plane onto the next one, because that way they don't have to type test it, which is the reverse, I suppose.
Mm.
Yeah, it is intriguing how jumping out in the future and trying something new, how risky that is. Russ Akoff points that out, the corporate system and even the government system and evidently not-for-profit companies and school systems. The idea is if you try something new and it doesn't work, that shows up in the record. But if you fail to try something new that would have been a wonderful thing to do, it doesn't show up in the record that you had this idea that would have been a wonderful thing and didn't act on it. That doesn't show up in the record. So if you want to make sure you still have your job year after year after year, don't try anything new. Because if it goes wrong, you can always say, it ain't my fault. I did what we always do.
Yeah, don't speak up.
We reinforce that nobody tries anything new.
Yeah.
Especially if the return isn't going to show up for 3 years.
Yeah, for sure.
If it's going to show up in 3 weeks, then yes, let's go do it.
It's odd, isn't it? Things like the Walkman, that can't have happened very quickly, can it?
Yeah.
It was a combination of technologies that allowed a small item to be carried around and play music to ourselves with the Walkman, Sony Walkman. So they must have had a hell of a big investment in that.
Yep. And what's intriguing, Deming doesn't believe that necessarily a monopoly is evil. He says a monopoly is in the best position to spend money on the future because it's not busy worrying about survival. And the classic example is if you look at 1925 when Bell Labs was founded, and the Bell Labs system was funding people doing research just for the sake of research, not research so telephones could get better. And that went on and on and on. And then when we broke Ma Bell up, nobody is spending money on just pure research. Bell Labs got twisted into doing stuff that is very phone related until they finally just sort of collapsed because they lost their funding. And you start to look at that and think about Deming's idea that if the monopoly is in the best position to do things and meets its obligation to the future, it might not be a brilliant idea to tear them apart. It might be a good idea to make sure they are working on the future. And if they're not, then you can go in and take action against those companies who are not meeting their obligation to the future. That panics a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
turned into a commodity and they lost, right? Lost their
They lost
kind of their
everything.
advantage, their research. Yeah.
That's the Kodak thing, isn't it?
Yep.
And these are great companies.
Yeah, really great companies. Yeah.
Really great companies. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Bell Labs. They were like, wow.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, according to the clock on this wall, it's time for us to wrap it up and get organized for next week. And if I had it in front of me, I'd tell you, I think we're reading chapter 2 next week,
Yep, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
which would make sense. And I'll try to get the link fixed because that might make it easier. But my competency with software and software devices is limited.
Join the club.
Every time,
your last email was fantastic because you give us the program and the links and the data that would get us in. So we did get in because of that. So thank you.
Yes, I will get this recording posted. It usually takes about a day, and then I'll send you the link so you can go back and listen if you want, or go back and check if there's something you'd like edited out. You can ask for it, but there's no way to do it. So
No, don't worry about it.
Okay.
It's not going to affect my career now.
yeah. Thank you all. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
all.
me too. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for organizing.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, too bad I can't organize the link.
Keep sharing.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
We'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Yep. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
There we go.
That was a good session.